What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us for a very special Thursday edition of Fantasy MLB Today. We are a Sports Ethos presentation, of course, and I'm your host, Joe Orico. You can find me over on Twitter at Joe Orico99. And you can check out all of our fantasy baseball content here at Ethos Fantasy BB. Make sure you guys are checking out sportsethos.com. Get everything right from the source over there if you're not using social media. But today we have a very fun episode. We got a couple of great guests. Haven't seen them in a while, so it should be good to catch up with these two buddies of mine, buddies of each other. They are on the same show on CBS pretty regularly. Obviously going to let them talk about all the things that they have going on here. But Frank Stampfl and Chris the Welsh are joining us here. Guys, thank you so much for making the time today.
Joey, thanks for having us, bud. Welsh, long time no see, man. How's it going?
Frank Stampfl. What's up, man? I know it's like I haven't seen you like 2 days ago. It's very good. And how about we all weren't with each other like a month and a half ago or whatever, just hanging out at first pitch. Joe Rico, a two-time first pitcher. Frank Stampfl, a two-time first pitcher. I love both of these gentlemen. I do.
Yeah, Frank and I, first year was the same year last season at the end of 2022, I guess. I'm going to be going every single year, Frank. I think you're probably in the same boat. We're going to be heading down there as much as we possibly can. Always good to meet up with the rest of the community down there in Arizona. I wish I could get out to like Florida and New York and Vegas and do all the different events, but being a college kid, I am kind of limited in terms of finances, in terms of what I'm able to do. But Arizona, 100% be seeing you guys again next year. And of course, we'll talk a few times throughout the season. This is the first time we're talking this year. 2024 has just began. And I think it's time that we start looking at some ADP battles. I know it's kind of a fun topic in the community, this player versus that player, but there's a lot of drafts going on. And I think we can actually help some people out here today by going through one or two examples at each position of guys that are going within about 5 or 10 picks of each other. I really did try to make them realistic. I don't want to be doing a guy who's going to pick 70 and pick 110. These are guys all going within about 5 picks of each other, and that will be our ADP battle for today. We're going to start off behind the plate, I think. But first, I want to let you guys tell us all about the work you got going on. Welshie, you got some news pretty recently. Why don't you let us know what's going on in your world?
Yeah, I mean, anybody that follows me, January 1st, I am officially a full-timer over at FantasyPros and Betting Pros, where you can check me out. We actually just kicked off literally yesterday, brought back leading off. I'd been doing some dynasty stuff. I've been there for a while, so I'm going to be a host analyst over on Fantasy Pros, still doing in this league. This is why Fantasy Pros is so great, completely allowing me to continue 10 years this year, 2024. 10 years I've been doing in this league, and people are just finding out about me, by the way, in the last 2 years. So that tells you about this industry and doing it independently. 2 years, the last 2 years has been my come up, if you will, if there's any version of that. But I'm still doing in this league, still doing Prospect One, and Frank Stampfl and the wonderful people at CBS, who, by the way, are amazing from top to bottom. Not just the guys I get to do the show with on air, but even people behind the scenes. They have been supportive of just me in general, and are allowing me to come back in, relatively normal degree, getting to do mostly show, probably not every single week, but shows every single month. So I'm very excited to be able to continue with Frank and Scott and Towers and all them. And get to do a lot of cool stuff. So you can check me out at Is It the Welsh. That's where all the webbings of my layer lie.
I think I speak for the whole fantasy community when I say we're so happy for you getting a full-time gig. It's long overdue. Something that should have happened a long time ago, but it's great that ITL is still chugging along. I think that was something that people were a little bit worried about. Is ITL? You see a couple of comments, right? Is ITL still going to be around? Of course, you guys are going to be around. That's going to always be there, I think. Frankie, what's going on over at CBS?
Yeah, so we're starting to ramp it up here in the new year, 2024. Fantasy Baseball Today is the podcast where you can listen to me and Chris Towers and Scott White, and occasionally we'll still have the Welsh on. Once a week, a couple times a month, we'll have him on there sporadically. So not going anywhere, but yeah, we're starting to ramp things up a little bit more. We have a 5-minute podcast as well, Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. We have a YouTube channel. You can watch all of our podcasts. They're about to go live on YouTube as well. They've been video on demands for the past couple of months. We're going to have rankings on CBSSports.com. Those are coming out in the next couple of weeks. We'll have all different versions of sleepers, breakouts, and busts, articles, and all that kind of fun stuff leading up to the start of the season. So you can find like written work and rankings, CBSSports.com, the podcast Fantasy Baseball Today, and Fantasy Baseball Today in 5.
And can I add, you can vote for Fantasy Baseball Today right now as best fantasy baseball podcast. I'm always honored when anyone tags me. There's literally no credit I get to it, but you should vote for Scott White, Frank, and Towers, who's now going to be joining the baseball pod full time. I think Frankie's got the links and stuff on his Twitter, but there's some voting there. So the sports ethos community maybe can rally around and get CBS, I think, a 2-time best baseball award.
Let's go,
go
back
ahead.
to back, baby.
Go vote for Frank. Go vote for Scott. Go vote for the Chris's. That's not the FSWA award, is it? That's something else?
No, this is the best baseball podcast in the Sports Podcast Award. So it's something completely different. It's literally not even like a fantasy podcast. It's just best baseball podcast. So yeah, you can find the link on my Twitter, X. I don't know what we're going with anymore, at @roto_Frank.
I think it's just Twitter. I mean, sometimes I still try and call it X, but I think Twitter it's always just going to be called Twitter. Go check out Frank at @roto_Frank, at Is It The Welsh, and like I said, at JoelRico99. You can check out what I have going on. But let's get into these ADP battles. Let's start behind the dish, and let's start with, I think, one that's going to be probably a troubling one for me throughout draft season. William Contreras and Will Smith. They're both going right around pick 84, 85. Frank, do you have a preference between these two?
I do have a preference, and I'm going to lean with William Contreras, who just finished as the #1 catcher in fantasy in 2023. And I think playing time is going to be a pretty big advantage here for William Contreras. He just had 611 plate appearances. That was second most among catchers this past season. He played 141 games. Only 108 of those were at catcher, 33 at DH. So that ability for William Contreras to fill in as the DH when they want to give him like half a day off as catcher, I think that's just huge for his playing time. You know, on a per plate appearance basis, on a per game basis, Will Smith might actually be better. I think, the counting stats have a chance to be better in that Dodgers lineup, but just that playing time advantage, I'm going to lean with William Contreras. With Will Smith, he's not going to get any games in at DH as long as Shohei Ohtani is healthy. And based on everything that we've heard, it sounds like Ohtani's going to be ready to go on opening day. So I think that kind of limits the upside and the playing time for Will Smith. And as a result, I will lean with William Contreras.
Welsh, do you agree here? I mean, Will Smith has been the last 3 years 130, 137, and 126 games. Now, only 14 of them did come at DH last year, but if you're shaving 14 games off of 126, it's kind of significant at that point. What do you think here between these two guys, though?
Yeah, I mean, to be the cheap, dumb answer, I would say neither, by the way. I'm not really interested in early catchers, but 2-catcher leagues I get. And sometimes you just are going to want to have the advantage at the position. Yeah, I think these are both interesting. And Frank hit a lot of the great points. I kind of want to say Will Smith simply because from that per game basis, I think there's an advantage on that team, kind of similar to look at a few of the players last year that had extra boosts on the and with the team context. Rangers specifically, like Josh Young, even though he has some warts, was like extra good. Jonah Heim, ridiculous RBI numbers. Having a really big, powerful offense behind you is going to kind of mitigate some of those warts. Will Smith looked like. Actually, last year looked a little bit more like an anomaly. His barrel percentage kind of tanked. He had never had a barrel percentage under 10%, and it almost went in half. It went to 6.7. Well, a lot of the other stuff kind of maintained, and one of the reasons it looks like is him maybe attempting to be more than just like a fastball hitter, trying to hit breaking pitches a little bit better. He hit breaking 201 in 2022, jumped up to 264 this past year, but he had a dip in his overall contact percentage against breaking pitches. Same thing happened with off speed as well. So I think just trying to be a better complete hitter, less of a strikeout option. So I think last year's stats are going to rebound and the RBI and run totals could pop up, but like Frank said it the best, like you're going to get more at bats with William Contreras. There's a lot of underlying good support, big hard hit numbers. I would lean him if given the same ADP numbers, but I don't want to discount Will Smith because I think from the per game basis, if you look, I actually think he could overpass William Contreras, but I think Contreras is kind of the option, especially if you're just looking for like the big power numbers. 48.7% hard hit is pretty wild. And he's near the tippy top of like early projected power numbers, like even on Steamer, and the batting average works well. So yeah, Contreras is the not quick answer to give you, but I feel like I could turn in draft season to Will Smith.
I think it's super close. The fact that you're probably going to get more plate appearances out of Contreras, you'll get probably a couple more steals out of him. I would probably lean that way as well. Just the unknown of what it can look like RBI wise, batting behind Ohtani, Freeman and Betts is, I mean, he's probably going to drive in close to 100. I think that's, fairly reasonable to think that. Now, if it comes over 120 games and you're maybe sacrificing some batting average, some stolen bases, I think it's really close. I'm probably leaning Contreras, but I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer here. I think that they're both going to have very, very good top 5 catcher seasons at worst. I would be very surprised if they don't get back in there. Contreras with the power coming down a little bit this year did concern me to some extent, but I think I'm still going to be leaning his way overall here. Let's talk about first base. Let's talk about a bit of a fun one. I've kind of tried to not just take early round guys. I've tried to make a bit of a mix, but this is a very early debate you're going to be having probably at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round. Matt Olson and Bryce Harper, they're going pick 16 and 17 respectively. Welsh, do you have a preference between these two? I know Olson's just coming off of a season where I think he was the number 2 fantasy player. I think he was actually more valuable than Betts and Freeman were. But then we got the Bryce Harper unknown coming back, another year removed from the injury now. Are we going to see that power fully come back? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do have a preference on this one, and it's Matt Olson. And I don't know where everybody else lies with this. I know Bryce Harper is moving up a whole bunch. Obviously, that second half, like what he put together once he kind of got his feet under and being able to play first base changed a lot. But I just like what Matt Olson did, 55.5% hard hit percentage, near the tippy top of the league, top 1 percentile. Expected slug, 557. I actually think, it was top 3%. So it's near the tippy top. Hard hit, 118.6. Barrel percentage was elite. Expected batting average, 264. Tied for the second best expected batting average over the last 4 years, to go with a really good batting average this past year. And that's like one of the key markers here is he just became exceptionally a better hitter, hit 314 against fastballs with a 96.2 exit velocity against fastballs, the primary pitch he's seeing. All of that, I just say, and I line up to be like, I think Matt Olson is a high batting average for like his type of power. So like 260 plus. I think the power is absolutely real to go with the batting average. I have a hard time imagining he's hitting under 40 in any place. And I know Harper is definitely, he's in that top tier elite talent, but like if I'm in those teens, I really would love to have like a extra stretch on a specific position where I can take a stranglehold. And that's like power speed combo players. And I think Matt Olson is the elite of elite in power. So even though I lean like Juan Soto over Judge a little bit, because I think of the combo of everything he's going to do in this instance, like I am leaning on the major power from Matt Olson. I think he could lead homers again. Shout out to Frank for his last season bet on leading in homers. But Matt Olson is my pick for elite power, because I think it's going to retranslate on an incredibly good team and a great lineup that it kind of challenges the Dodgers a little bit. But yeah, I think the floor is so immense with Matt Olson with incredible highs. He is my pick. I keep wanting to move him up, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he's going in the beginning of the second round. Do you think he ends up going in the first round by the time March comes around?
I think there's drafts like I haven't looked what his min pick is in NFBC. If I were to take a guess, I would bet it's like 10. I would bet you somebody push 10 to 12, somewhere in there. I think there's a possibility. The only thing that holds it back is there's some good top end first basemen, and then you're getting some deals later, like Paul Goldschmidt. I think there's going to be a good rebound on Paul Goldschmidt this year. He's going a little bit later. I think that could hold people back from going really high. It's just going to be about like, is everybody going to buy into going for elite power? That was stolen bases, and I think we're coming back down a little bit off of chasing stolen bases so crazy, where it's a little bit more apropos to like lock into power more than we've ever done before. And that's what I want to do. And that's why I want Matt Olson.
So get this. I'm just looking at the NFBC ADP over the last month. Somebody took Matt Olson second overall in a draft champions format in the middle of December.
Okay, never mind.
Maybe his mom is drafting.
Was that Matt Olson? Can he do that?
Second overall. I don't know if we're going to see that again, but I guess to your point, people are going to be interested.
What's Harper's min?
Harper's min in December is 12.
Interesting. Okay. Well, yeah, maybe that was Matt Olson's mom, actually.
Yeah. Frank, where are you going between these two guys?
Yeah, so as the Welsh pointed out, Matt Olson does have a special place in my heart. put a $20 bet on him to lead the league in home runs, paid out $600. So I was pretty happy with that on Matt Olson before the season. I don't know that there's a wrong answer. I think it comes down to how you want to construct your team. But I'm actually going to go with Bryce Harper because I'm willing to sacrifice some power for the batting average and the 10 to 12 more steals that I would project for Bryce Harper going into the season. He got off to a slow start, but then flipped a switch once we got to August. Final 2 months, Bryce Harper hit .299, 16 homers, an OPS over 1,000, 93.3 average exit velocity, 21% barrel rate during that time. The 150-game pace over those final 2 months, 45 homers, 11 steals. And I wouldn't even project that. I would probably project 35 to 38 homers, like mid to upper 30s, 10 to 12 steals, something like that. But the batting average, I really want to get batting average early in my drafts. And I agree. I mean, Olson, for being the power hitter he's going to provide solid batting average. I think anywhere from like 255 to 265 is fair. But Bryce Harper has a 287 expected batting average or better 4 straight seasons. So I feel pretty good that he's going to hit 280, 285 plus, give you that power. The counting stats should be there. I like that Phillies lineup. He's going to chip in a few bags as well. One other thing with Matt Olson, too, it's just like very clearly you're buying off of a career year. Now, maybe he could just do this again. I'm willing to take the under on 266 combined runs in RBI that he just put up this past season. He's currently projected for like 215, which is still really good and probably would come close to leading all of baseball. But yeah, it just feels like buying off a career year. Bryce Harper has that track record and just a little bit of a different skill set, which I would favor over Matt Olson.
And sometimes like with these, like you made a good point. You can pick your poison on like roster construction with not really doing anything wrong. Like when you're in the top 2 rounds, it is going to be, I'm not saying you can't, because you definitely could screw it up, but it is harder to screw up like the first round. I would be okay. Not that you'd want to do this. I would do a draft where I go Freeman and Olson. If I had like Freeman fell down to like 12 and Olson came back around in the second round, I'd be comfortable taking both of those guys because I think the floors are immense. And I think categorically, like, I think Matt Olson's going to beat Bryce Harper in 3 of the 5 categories that we're playing in standard fantasy. But you could give the advantage to those stolen bases to Harper, but sometimes it might be about your build. If you went all power and you want a little bit more speed, you're chasing the batting average. The first 2 or 3 rounds can either A, be best player, or you can start to really focus in on your construction. I think both of these players work for construction, and I think Frank said it best, like you really can't go wrong. But I think I'm a power chaser. I'm to power what Scott White is to strikeouts this year.
I think, Olson's probably not going for 50 again, but even if he gives you 40 to 45 kind of range, that lineup is ridiculous. He's still going to have the counting stats. The batting average has fluctuated a little bit, so that's where I think maybe you're good in the 250, 260, where with Harper, it's probably closer to 300. The whole lineup thing, too, I mean, they're not the Braves, but the Phillies have Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Castellanos, Baum, Stott, JT Realmuto. It's a very deep lineup, so I don't think that Harper's going to suffer counting stat-wise. I think he should still be very good. And I don't have any problem, like you said, like taking 2 first basemen at the end of the first round. If that's the best player available, I'm not so much looking towards roster construction in round 1 or round 2. If the best 2 players available are Freeman and Harper or Freeman and Olson and Harper, I have no problem putting one of those guys at a corner infield spot because they're the best player available at that point. No problem whatsoever. Now let's move on to second base. Let's talk about another Philly, and that's Bryson Stott. He's going around pick 100, and Gleyber Torres, 93. So this is about the biggest gap of any 2 guys we're going to talk about. I know it's not a huge gap, but where are we lying in terms of preference right now, Frank? I'll start with you and Gleyber, your Yankee. I don't know that I think he's going to do anything differently than he's done the last couple seasons. I think he's a 25 home run, 10 steal kind of guy with a pretty solid batting average floor. We did just see Bryson Stott have a really, really good year in Philadelphia where he did kind of break out as well. He stole 30 bases. He had 15 homers. Where are you leaning between these 2 guys as of right now?
So for anybody watching, you're going to see all the Yankee stuff behind me, and I'm wearing a Volpe Mania shirt, so you're probably going to call me a homer. But I am going to take Gleyber Torres. I like both of these players a lot, by the way. They both just finished as top 75 players, according to the Razzball Player Rater. And Gleyber Torres, very consistent back-to-back seasons, 24-plus homers, 10-plus steals. He made huge strides in terms of plate discipline. 10% walk rate to go along with a career-best 14.6% strikeout rate. That was up around 23% in 2022. I think there are some questions whether he can maintain that good of a strikeout rate moving forward. Maybe it's like in the upper teens, closer to 20%. But I think this is a player who has been very consistent the past couple of years, probably going to hit 260 plus, around 25 homers, 10 to 15 steals. And now with Juan Soto joining that lineup, I have to assume that the counting stats are going to get even better for Gleyber Torres. For anyone who cares about like the contract year thing too, that's another, just if you're looking at Gleyber Torres, he is entering a contract year. I like Stott a lot as well. I think it comes down to, like, again, roster construction. If you need more steals at that point in the draft, I have no problem saying I want to take Bryce and Stott over Gleyber Torres. He just gave you 31 steals, great sprint speed. Love the splits from Bryce and Stott too. As a lefty, he hit really well against lefties in 2023. But overall, if it's just in a vacuum, I will lean Gleyber Torres slightly ahead of Bryce and Stott.
I think you said it perfectly. It's more about the roster construction there. If you want a little more power, you go Gleyber. If you need a little more speed, you go Bryson. Welsh, do you have a preference between these two in a vacuum?
Very much so. It is also Gleyber Torres. We actually just talked about him. We're talking about the risers and everything. And I didn't say this super well or coherently, so I'll try to say a little bit more coherently when I was saying it on CBS. One of the things I really liked about Gleyber, and I wrote him up in our friend Joe Pisapia's The Fantasy Black Book, which is out, which, by the way, was rated the #1 fantasy baseball book on Amazon. So shout out to him, cheap plug. But Gleyber was one of those guys when I was doing the whole infield that really stood out in the changes that he made. And one of the things I love, like on the surface, you see crazy dip in strikeout percentage down to 14.6%, top 10% best of the league. He was 22.5% the year prior. What went along with that was a hard hit dip and a barrel percentage dip. So what you see is like those big hard hit numbers went down and his overall approach got better. Well, one of the things when I started like looking into his profile was sliders. He massively improved himself off of sliders last year. And then I went and looked at zone charts, and this is what I didn't say properly, but when you take like the middle and the bottom of the outside of the zone where the slider's breaking, he was swinging through that stuff in years prior. What happened this year? It dipped by like 10% on both quadrants of that against sliders. So all of that is to say, he made, this is like the first time we saw a drastic change in the approach of his comfortability of who he is as a hitter. He ended up hitting 300 against fastballs and 262 against breaking pitches while hitting 269 with an expected 278 against sliders, which is great. And his expected batting average is better. All of this nonsense is saying, I just think he became a better hitter. He didn't lose a ton of the hard hit and the barreling, kind of like Cody Bellinger did. Cody Bellinger did the same thing, but then his like hard hit percentage just absolutely tanked. I think Gleyber is in a great ballpark. I think there's great run support. He started stealing some bases into the double digits. I'm not even sure in a vacuum, outside of the vacuum here, I'm even going to have Stott over. I like Stott. I like the stolen base chase. I just really think Gleyber has made himself into such a better hitter. I want to bet on it. I don't think there's a massive gap on stolen bases, and I love the team context, so I'm very team Gleyber here.
Yeah, I think Stott, I mean, he's projected. Steamer thinks he's going from 31 down to 20 steals, and if that is reality, then, I mean, at that point, Gleyber's going to give you 13 or something. That's not a huge difference. The rest of the profile, pretty similar, except Gleyber's going to give you more power. Stott did bat 280. I don't know how realistic that is going forward. I think he's probably like a 260 to 270 guy. And again, I'd probably only take Stott here. Again, I'm team Gleyber as well. I'm only taking Stott if you're in a position where you've maybe gone with your Corey Seagers and your Matt Olsons and your guy Bo Bichette's and your types who aren't really going to be stealing you so many bases, and you kind of need to make up for it. I think that it makes a lot of sense to take a look at Stott here.
You know, one good thing to add with Gleyber too, 284 expected batting average. If you want to sit in a batting average spot, like not only did he make all those great changes to be a better hitter as far as like strikeouts and walks, also sustainable batting average, which I think that expected BA was higher than his actual. So I don't know. I think Gleyber's in a great spot.
Yeah, I'm there with you as well. Especially like you said, Frank, adding Juan Soto into town. That certainly does not hurt the prospects of the counting stats. Let's talk about third base, and we're going to talk about a little bit of Alex Bregman. And it's funny, Alex Bregman, Welsh, when you had me on ITL last year, we did a player debate, and it was Bregman versus Matt Chapman at the beginning of the year, and it looked like Chapman was going to be the guy. I don't know if Chapman hit another home run after I was on ITL in April at some point. So it was definitely Bregman. But this year, we're talking Bregman and Nolan Arenado. They're both going maybe a little bit later than you would have expected, especially Arenado. It's a bit of a shock to see him outside of the top 100. But 100 and 103 respectively. Welsh, I think they're very close here, but do you have a preference between Arenado and Alex Bregman at this point?
Yeah, this is funny because when I was on CBS the other day, I'm in a DC right now, and I was talking with Frank, and I was kind of battling between them, like Arenado's here and Brian Reynolds and Goldschmidt, and I took Reynolds, and then like another round went, and I took another guy. We got around 135, and Arenado was still there, kept dropping, and I took him. Of course, I took him, Frank. He went 3 rounds after you and I were talking about that, and I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it's about the upside of the position early on. There's some cool bets you can do later. Guys like Noelvi Marte. I do think people might be getting to this place where it's like, I want these or I want the later guys. I mean, if we're being honest, like I want Junior Caminero on every single team because he's the cheapest of cheap right now. So there's good bets in the middle. So these middle guys are starting to suffer while also acknowledging that like both of these guys aren't the best bets on the planet. But I'm going to take Arenado here because I've also invested in him. I like what Bregman does. I think Bregman, I use this word a lot, like he's an optimizer. He has optimized himself to the fullest. You know, he pulls the ball a decent amount. All of his homers are pull side homers. I don't think the big hard hit, I mean, he's not a big hard hit guy. It's 38% barrel dropped. Like, I just don't think when you look at like barrel and you look at his overall hard hit, that's someone that can sustain big power. And he's only doing it by absolutely maximizing the way that, which is, by the way, like a super smart hitter and stuff. So I really like him. From Arenado's perspective, he's kind of similar, I suppose, if you're peeking through, but better barrel percentage overall, much better pull hitter. I like the lineup context, 266 batting average I can deal with. I mean, I'm kind of just picking at straws here with both of these players. I think the better points league player is Bregman. Arenado, I think, is going to maybe jump back into a little bit more of a bounce back this coming year. And I'm going to be buying in on him just because I think you're going to get high 20 homers. You have the potential of 100 run, 100 RBI with that team. He's always going to be put there, where I just don't think that's with Bregman. But again, points leagues, Bregman. Arenado, I'm going to take in standard roto categories.
Bregman is such a product of his environment, I find. If he was on just some average, mediocre team, I don't know that we'd even really talk about him so much at this point. Like, obviously, he had those seasons, 2018, 2019. I think 2019, he was the runner-up for MVP. But if you look at what he did this year, 25 home runs, which is, it's good, but it's not crazy. He had 103 runs and 98 RBIs, which, again, is a very good number. But he played 161 games for an incredible offense. He batted .262. He had 3 stolen bases. You stick him on any random team, I don't know that we're even really talking about him. Where Arenado, I find it doesn't really matter where he is. Now, he's in the declining phase of his career.
Yeah.
Last year was a down year for him for sure, but I think he's somebody that's a little more talented just in and of himself. And I know like Bregman's still playing for Houston, so it doesn't really matter. Like, he's a product of that environment. He's in that environment, so it doesn't matter. But I think that Arenado can sustain himself a little bit more. I think the batting average is probably a little bit higher of a floor at this point. It's pretty close, but I think I'm just slightly leaning Arenado at this point. He's one of those boring guys. They both kind of are at this point, honestly, that are just falling down drafts because there are guys like Skubal and Nolan Jones and Royce Lewis and God knows how many others getting pushed up. And people are kind of forgetting about Arenado going at 130. I mean, I think that's ridiculous. People are forgetting about him to that extent. I know he had a down year, but Frank, are you on the Arenado side here? Are you on the Bregman side? I'm leaning Arenado, but I'm interested what you think here.
So I think these two guys are like the Spider-Man meme, right? They are the same player. Not the same. They are very similar players. I will give the slight edge to Nolan Arenado. Welsh, you mentioned you got Arenado, what, in the 8th round of that draft that you're doing?
Yeah, yeah. Keep going. I'm looking. I'm going to give you the exact number and everything. I think that's what it ended up being.
So I actually had the decision of Arenado versus Bregman, and I took Arenado in the beginning of the 7th round. Now, this is a 15-team league. Welsh, I think that makes us Arenado bros because
Arenado bros.
But even in a down year for Arenado, he still hit 266. He gave you 26 homers, 93 RBI in 144 games. And moving forward, I'd still project a little bit more power for Arenado than I would for Bregman. Now, Bregman, he is, I think, healthier at this point in his career. The counting stats, maybe a little bit better overall between the runs and RBI because the Astros lineup is still going to be better than the Cardinals. But I do think you're going to get a little bit more power, maybe 28 to 30 home runs from Arenado. And we're talking about a down year. He nearly put up 100 RBI. I think the Cardinals lineup is going to bounce back as well. If you remember, Arenado got off to a slow start. He got hit by a pitch in his hand in the WBC and basically just like tanked his April. He hit 239 that month. He was much better like the next 3 months after that, kind of finished with this back injury. So I worry about that. He's turning 33 years old in March, but still going to give the slight edge to Arenado. And I think if you play in a deeper league, these 15-team drafts that the Welsh and I are in, these are perfect players in the middle rounds because they just give you the counting stats, right? It's like set it and forget it. They're not sexy options. They're not going to give you excess value, but you're just going to get whatever, 25 to 30 home runs and really good counting stats without hurting your batting average.
I'll do you one better. 9th pick in the 9th round he was.
Wow. Now I feel dirty that it took him in the 7th round.
I know.
I kind of want to redo it.
I guess it's crazy. I don't even know what that number is, but it's a good number.
Wow.
9th pick in the 9th round is like 144 or something like that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
9th pick in the 9th round. Pretty wild too when you just consider like he was bar none the best player that was sitting out there. And in NFBC is interesting too because you're playing upside a lot. You're playing for the big hit, the home run swing. But these guys, break it at best, in any team, it doesn't need to be NFBC, have these like core boring players to kind of balance out some of the risks that you're going to end up taking because you want to take risks. I mean, I think like the roto process is kind of just like old and boring and the guys that get you there and just, chug through the season. But league winners are out there. League winners might be going in the 140s and 150s. I just missed a league winner in Wyatt Langford. Somebody just absolutely stole him from under me. Those are the type of guys, Junior Caminero, and guys we're not talking about right now, or we will in the 200s, that you can take some of those big shots on, but it feels a lot better to do it when you've got those. I'll throw Bregman too. Bregman, Arenado, just guys to kind of hold your team together while you're either dealing with an injury, you're dealing with a slump, or maybe a miss on a high upside player. So let those players fall and swoop them up in drafts, both Arenado and Bregman.
Plus, Welsh, I just want to add this real quick. I think you want to take those risks later on, right? You mentioned you want Junior Caminero. He's going outside the top 220 picks, right? Like that's a good time to take a risk. Whereas in these middle rounds, especially in a deeper league, you just kind of want to rack up plate appearances and counting stats. Arenado, I took Swanson in this draft, Ian Happ. They're just kind of boring guys, but like they're going to get you there, and then you can afford to take risks later on.
Yep, preach it.
There was a panel in Arizona that had, that had Dave Potts on it, and Dave Potts has won millions of dollars playing fantasy baseball. He's one of the smartest people in the industry. He works with roto grinders, and he was talking about how he is successful pretty much every year just by fading these hot guys that are being pushed up boards, and he'll take the boring guys. And the Arenado, I think, is like a perfect example. Arenado is usually a guy who's been a top 50 to 70 kind of pick at worst. You're getting him 4, 5, 6 rounds later. That's exactly the kind of guy that the players who are successful are going to be taking, not somebody like the teams that win the main event overall is not going to be 3rd round Royce Lewis, 4th round Tarik Skubal, 5th round Nolan Jones. It'll be the guys who are taking a higher floor and not taking those chances in the top 100 picks. And I think a guy like Arenado is a perfect opportunity there.
You're about to unload one of those on us right now. The next debate, you're about to unload one of those like arguably kind of like huge ADP players that, I mean, I would also throw in like guys like Ellie. Ellie is part of, I think, this discussion when you're talking about top 20 overall pick. You can take that shot. I would be pretty cognizant of getting the Brian Reynolds and the Arenados and stuff like that out of the world after. But guys like Dave Potts are probably going to fade Ellie and probably fade one of the guys you're about to talk about.
Yeah, and I'll just say one last point about the Cardinals. They were terrible last year, but it was because of their pitching mostly. Their offense was actually pretty solid throughout most of the year. They were a top 10, top 12 offense. So if everybody's fading them because, well, the team just stinks now, it's the pitching stinks. But offensively, I think they're still going to be pretty solid. But let's move on to this one that I think is going to trouble me. It's going to keep me up at night. CJ Abrams and Bo Bichette. Now, I'm a Toronto guy. I'm obviously more on the Bo Bichette side. I'm not somebody who likes to take those chances, as if you just heard me talk for the last couple minutes. I'll take the safer thing, and I personally think that Bo Bichette is probably the safer thing over CJ Abrams. We've seen it over a couple of years now. Abrams kind of exploded over the second half of the season with the stolen bases. And yet still he had a 99 WRC plus over the time where he was exploding. And that's not necessarily tied to fantasy, but it just shows, I think, that he's kind of limited in terms of what his actual upside can be as a baseball player. He's still a kid, but I'm a little bit worried about CJ Abrams. I think, is it Frank's turn to kick us off here on this one? CJ Abrams and Bo Bichette.
Yes, it's definitely, whether it's mine or not, it's Frank's to make this decision.
The answer is probably neither at cost for me, but I would lean with Bichette. Give me the batting average. Again, I want to get batting average early on in drafts versus the downside risk of Abrams. Now, when I say that, I want to preface all of this. I think Abrams is one of these big range of outcomes type guys where next year we could be talking about him as a first round player, right? If you look at what he did once he got moved to leadoff in July, he was on a 20-70 pace, 20 homers, 70 steals. There is not another player that can provide a skill set like that. I also think the downside is we're talking about CJ Abrams outside of like the top 150 picks next year. So it's a big range of outcomes. Bo Bichette doesn't steal bases anymore. That's, one part of his game that obviously we don't like. Even if he could give us like 12 to 15 bags, we would feel good about that. But the batting average is still great. The XBA this past season for Bo Bichette was 308. I still think he's going to give you around 25 home runs. Something else with Bo Bichette is I feel like for him to reach his upside, him and Vlad are tied together. Like they both have to have huge seasons. This is going to sound so obvious, right? But like they need to work together in order to reach their fantasy upside. It's not going to happen. Like if Vlad doesn't have a monster season, Bo Bichette is not going to have a monster season and vice versa. They just don't have enough left in their lineup. I mean, Springer is a fine leadoff guy, but like for them to really click, both of those guys have to be on. So I think Bichette's value is very much so tied to like, do you think Vlad Jr. is going to bounce back and have another huge season? Again, I'm probably not taking either of these guys at the cost, but if I am taking one, it's probably going to be Bo Bichette.
Yeah, the Blue Jays lineup is not what it was a couple of years ago with Semien and Hernandez and 4 Silver Slugger winners in the lineup. The Blue Jays did not win a Silver Slugger last year. Their only finalist was Whit Merrifield. So it's definitely a team that has to kind of reevaluate offensively. And if they're not able to add some more pieces, I think there's still a chance they add a couple of pieces, whether it's Soler, maybe a long shot Bellinger signing. They need to kind of bolster that lineup around Bo and Vladdy because I think I agree with you. They're kind of tied to each other. But even if those two go off, their other 7 spots in the lineup are not looking so great. So the Blue Jays kind of need to bolster that situation. But then CJ Abrams, not a hell of a lot going on around him in that lineup either, outside of maybe Lane Thomas, Keibert Ruiz, maybe some of the younger guys that come up this year. Welsh, what are your thoughts on Abrams versus Bichette? And also as a side note, do you think we'll see some of those Nationals prospects be called up this year? James Wood, a couple of those guys. Do you think we'll see them in the bigs?
Yeah, I think there's definitely. I think Cruz is on the clock. I think James Wood is probably. They might want to push. Like their development kind of just stinks in general, and I don't know what place they're in. They weren't really aggressive with the guys that they sent out to the Arizona Fall League. We didn't get James, even though by the way James Wood came here. He's best friends with Jackson Merrill. He was like training with Jackson Merrill, but he didn't come and play in the Fall League. But he kind of hung around. So yeah, I think there is a possibility, but it's at the back half of the year. I had an interesting. I'll just make this quick. I had a conversation with somebody with a team, and I was poking around about, does this team care about, let's say let's say this hypothetical team that has this really good prospect, maybe they were in the World Series, that they were going to have this player break from day one. And do they care about the compensation? And they said, yeah, they care about the compensation, but they actually care about the player pool. I was telling Frank about this off air. They care about the pool money that they get when a player starts from day one, wins Rookie of the Year, team Diamondbacks with Corbin Carroll get an extra pick, a compensatory pick. But the pool money is more valuable than the pick because that expands their draft. I'm saying all this to say a team like the Nationals should be hyper focused on that. But unless you're going to do it right off the shoot, I think you're going to wait till the back half of the year. So I'm coming back around to say, like, I just don't think Dylan Cruz and James Wood are going to do anything impactful for this season that's going to matter for anybody. I hate this debate. I wish you would have deleted it because I'm going to give an answer I don't like because Frank said it best. I really don't want these guys at cost, even though I did do an early mock and I took CJ Abrams, and CJ Abrams is going to be my answer, even though I'm probably going to talk more negatively about him because I don't trust the power. That's my biggest problem with him. I think he absolutely just got away with so much to put the power numbers he did, even though I will point out his projected steamer homers are more this coming year than they were last year. I always thought he's had solid power, but it's like low hard hit, low barrel percentage. He doesn't pull the ball a whole bunch. StatCast has a home run marker of like no doubt and blah, 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 blah. I think 5 of his homers were registered as no doubt homers. So there wasn't a question of where the ballpark was, where I think more than double digit of his homers were within 1 to 7 ballparks. This would have been a homer in. That's kind of an arbitrary thing, but that also shows like, you got to get lucky in those situations. So I think he's closer to a 10 to 15 homer guy, but here's my difference in why I'm picking him. I think Bichette is safe. The batting average is there, expected batting average plays. I do think he's boring. I think he is like the Alex Bregman of shortstops, and you have to pay 70 prices higher for him. I don't like that, but I like the floor. The thing that's different with me is I think Abrams will steal and will always steal. Unless he absolutely tanks in batting average, he's going to steal 30-plus bases. Here's my problem with him. I think he is just a more expensive Nico Hoerner. So it's like, do I want the shortstop who's Bregman, who there's a huge value change, or do I want the shortstop that's like Nico and pay a whole bunch more? I don't really like either one of those, but I think Abrams is more stable for my fantasy team because of the huge stolen base numbers. I think the runs are going to be there. He posted a 246 expected batting average. So if he can hit 250, good runs, you can have garbage RBIs. Power is a little bit in question. So it's like, who'd you rather? I take it back. Who'd you rather have, Nico Hoerner or Alex Bregman? I think most of you would say Nico Hoerner. So I'm going to go with the speed upside there, even though Bichette is way safer. And I have kind of played like safe guys here for a little bit.
See, do you think it'll be easier to find some batting average a little bit later on of the steals, though? Because that's where I'm coming from. Like, I think you can maybe make up those steals that Abrams gives you with like an Esteury Ruiz. And I think there will be a difference in the production. Abrams will hit more home runs. The lineup's going to be better. But if you're just looking for speed, I feel like I might lean Bichette, depending on the build. And I was talking with Bubba a couple days ago. We were talking Blue Jays, and this is the same kind of argument I gave of, if you're taking those guys in the first couple rounds who aren't going to steal for you, then Bichette doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you start off with a Bobby Witt and then you take pitcher in round 2 and then go for Bichette, I think you're stabilizing the batting average there. I think that you're having, the balancing out of Bobby's probably 40 some odd steals with Bichette's likely single digit number. And I think that you could probably make that build work. And talking with you guys, maybe I am a little more inclined to fade Bichette because there are just so many shortstops I can find a little bit later. If it's a Hoerner, if it's a whoever, 20, 30, 50, 100 picks later, I think I could probably replicate both of it to some extent. I don't know that I'm finding a 300 batting average like I'm getting with Bo, but I can make up like 80 to 90% of that at a lower draft capital, I think. So I think you guys have talked me out of both of them. I don't think I want either of them at this point.
And only thing I would add is, like, we just had a conversation about boring ass players that are falling, and like Nolan Arenado. I mean, you could argue, I guess, batting average, but Arenado and Bregman, you can't find elite batting average later. You could find some stolen bases, but I just throw out, like, I'm at 160, almost 70, let's call it, in the draft. I see Yoshida, who's a high batting average guy. You could argue, like, do you like that or not? Brandon Nimmo. I'm just looking at outfield. I'm literally just sorted by outfield. So, like, I still think you can get power, and boring players are falling, but it is about, like, what can you stomach? And, maybe you just want the boring, Bo Bichette is boring, not elite overall, but you know what? That has a lot less range of outcome, like Frank said, than Abrams, who really could fall off. I shouldn't like act like he can't fall off. He absolutely can. It's just, I think he's a lock for 30 plus stolen bases. So I'll pay it, but I totally recognize he's just expensive Nico Hoerner.
The answer is to draft a starting pitcher in the 3rd round. So
yeah, exactly. George Kirby.
I think you've settled it. Let's move on to the outfield. And I think we're going to talk, I think it's Welsh's turn, but it's going to be a Yankee-centric question here. So I'm sure we're going to get Frankie weighing in. Aaron Judge and Juan Soto both going around pick 11, end of the 1st round. I don't really have a strong preference. I think you can honestly probably flip a coin and you'd be pretty okay, maybe slightly towards Judge. But Welsh, what are you thinking here? Do you have a preference between the two of them?
Yeah, I decided I'm going to go Soto over Judge. And I think it plays arbitrary to, like, maybe something I said earlier where it's like, hey, I want Matt Olson for the high-end power. I kind of would love a build with Soto and Olson. I think that would be really sweet. I think he's going to thrive. I know it is weird because the Yankees have, it's kind of like a median-ish ballpark factor, but then when you look at lefties, it's actually like the 3rd worst, I think it was, 3rd or 4th worst ballpark factor for lefties, which is really interesting. It doesn't matter. I still think he's going to thrive. I think the offensive support around him is great. He really pulled through, big homer year this past year. Expected batting average 284, which was top 10 percentile of the league. Best hard hit percentage of his career, top 1 percentile, 55.1% with a 13% barrel rate. You absolutely have to love that. I'd love to see him pull the ball a tiny bit more. But hey, we also know that the ballpark factor for lefties in general, that makes it a little bit worse. So let him spray it around. It's a fine ballpark for him that I think the offensive numbers are going to absolutely pop. He's not seen as the big superstar. You got Judge that's going to hold down the team. You can't go wrong here because I'm a defender, a big monster power. Wouldn't be shocked if Judge leads the league in homers again. And you can get like plus 550 right now, I think, for him to lead the league in homers, which I think I might just take that bet right now. But I do think Soto with the stolen bases, complete RBI run totals, I'm going to take my bet on him right now.
And how worried are we about the foot with Judge and the potential for him to be hindered stealing going forward? Do you think that's going to carry over into next year, Frank? Is that something that worries you at all?
I don't worry much about the foot anymore. They've talked about it this offseason. It was actually like a fractured toe, and they said it's healed. He didn't have surgery on it, and it's not going to be an issue heading into 2024. I just feel like the steals that he got in his MVP season, we just shouldn't expect anything close to that. Maybe he chips in like 5 to 10, but that's not why you're drafting Aaron Judge. You're drafting him because you want big power, you want 50-plus homers, you want the counting stats, and normally when he's on, it's going to come with a good batting average too. If you look before the injury, Aaron Judge was batting 291. After the injury, he hit 245. So I do think there's a chance he's 280 plus, 50 plus home runs, all that stuff. You look at just his 150 game pace, 52 homers, 111 runs scored, 106 RBI. Welsh, you mentioned some of like the power metrics and the exit velocities for Juan Soto. Aaron Judge, career high 97.6 average exit velocity, top in all of baseball. The next closest was Acuna at 94.7. We're talking about 3 miles per hour less on average.
You know what's crazy about that, by the way, is we did some episodes I did with Frank on CBS where I had some data for college bats for first year player, just mind you, with metal bats. And they have some absurd like exit velocities of like 120, whatever. Not a single metal bat college player had an average exit velocity, I think, over like 94, 95. 97 is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff for what Aaron Judge is doing, has continued to do. People might look at him and say, oh, he's injury prone. The dude stubbed his toe on a cement block in a ballpark, which kind of feels like it could have happened to anybody. So I'm not sure that I want to give him the injury prone label. You look at the previous 2 seasons, he played 157 games in 2022, 148 in 2021. I like both of these players a lot. I will lean with Aaron Judge. I still do think that the upside is higher for him than it is for Juan Soto. But a few things on Soto. Entering a contract year, we know he wants to make probably in excess of $500 million on whatever contract he's going to get next offseason. And he's leaving Petco Park, where he did struggle mightily in his career. It's something like 450 plate appearances like that. Juan Soto hit 231 with a 783 OPS in Petco Park. So imagine everywhere else he's played, he's been a lot better. So I do think he will have a better season overall than he has in previous years, but I will take Aaron Judge over Juan Soto.
By the way, 307 road game batting average this year with 23 of his homers in just under 300 at bats, 240 in San Diego with only 12 of his homers. So that's where some of that comes from too.
Is Juan Soto a Yankee for the rest of his career, Frank?
Oh, geez. I'll say yes, right? Because the teams that the Dodgers probably would be the team that they would be bidding against, right? And like, I don't think the Dodgers are going to do that now. I could be completely wrong given everything that they've done this offseason. I know the Mets, Steve Cohen, they have a lot of money to spend, and that could be the bidding war, right? It could be the battle of New York to see who gets Juan Soto for the rest of his career. I guess as of now, I will say yes, but not saying it with too much conviction, as you could tell.
Mm-hmm.
I think he ends up in a big market, whether in Toronto, New York, Los Angeles. Like, he's been in San Diego and Washington. I think that now that he's in New York, he's going to get a taste of that spotlight. I think he'll probably thrive in it. And then we see him lock up a 10 or 12-year deal or whatever it is. For your sake, I hope that happens. For my sake as a Jays fan, I hope it does not. But let's talk about another couple of outfielders who are vastly different. They are completely different type of profiles, but they're going at the same price, 93 and 97 respectively. That's Brian Reynolds and Kyle Schwarber. A lot more batting average, a lot less power in Reynolds. You're probably going to get some more speed, but Schwarber did have like 11 steals a couple of years ago. It was kind of just a random 11 steal season. They expand the bases and the rules are a little bit easier to steal, and he goes to 0 stolen bases. So he's kind of a hard one to evaluate there, but 40 homers, 100 runs, 100 RBI versus Reynolds in that Pittsburgh lineup, higher batting average, more steals. Frank, is it Frank's turn? I've lost track at this point, as I typically do
Sure.
midway through. Let's go to Frank. Is it Brian Reynolds or is it Kyle Schwarber for you at this price?
So this is going to be a cop-out answer, but I do think it's solely format dependent, right? If you play in Roto 5x5, it's Brian Reynolds. And to me, it's not close because he is someone that's going to do a little bit of everything and he's not going to hurt you anywhere. And those are the types of players I want in Roto. If you play in any type of head-to-head format, if it's head-to-head points, if it's head-to-head categories, then I would take Kyle Schwarber, where I'm not worried about the bad batting average in a head-to-head categories league. You could punt that category. Or in a points league, you get points for walks and on base percentage. And so the lower batting average doesn't really hurt you as much with a Kyle Schwarber. But if we're just talking Roto, I will take Brian Reynolds. Incredibly consistent the past couple of years. Has hit 262 and 263 the past 2 seasons, between 24 and 27 home runs each of the past 3 years. Did post a career high 12 steals this past season. He's always been someone, Brian Reynolds, who rates highly in sprint speed. And I wondered if with the new rules, can he get the steals up? And he did exactly that. So I'm not saying they're going to continue to go up, but I think you could project 10 to 12 steals for Brian Reynolds. Actually underperformed his expected numbers, hits the ball really hard, Brian Reynolds does. So I like him just because he's not going to hurt you as much. Kyle Schwarber, I mean, since the start of 2022, he's batting 207. It's just like if you're playing Roto, you have to bake in so many other batting average contributors just to get that back up to like respectability. So given that batting average, like I'm not doing it in Roto. I will take Brian Reynolds over Schwarber.
Yeah, I think if you start your draft with a very high batting average floor, you have Acuna, you have Corey Seager, you have those types of names. You could argue you maybe don't need the power at that point with Schwarber, but that's the kind of players I'd be looking at before Schwarber if you are thinking of taking him. And I've taken him once this season. I took him in a 15-team draft beginning of the offseason, and I did pair him with Corey Seager and a couple other batting average assets. So I think that's kind of the only way you can really do it in a Roto format. If you're taking a lot of those type of players, you're taking them with Pete Alonso and Max Muncy, it's not going to be looking so great, I don't think, for your batting average. Welsh, are you taking the power? Are you taking the batting average here? Which direction are you going between Schwarber and Reynolds?
Yeah, probably just in a vacuum, I'm going to say like Brian Reynolds. Like I completely agree with what Frank said. In your points league, give me Schwarber. Schwarber's the lead. If you didn't look at the batting average, beautiful. And if you're in a Roto, it's not even a question. Head-to-head categories, I could go either way. The only thing I've never loved is, yes, if you take Schwarber, you either you're punting, bye-bye, batting average. First, I've said this a bunch, but first pitch, there's a great panel. Do you remember what the panel was, Frank? On the batting average thing? Was it Chu that did it?
I'm not entirely sure. Are you talking about you can't find batting average off the waiver wire?
That's right. That's right. I might be mistaken, but that idea was the hardest thing to find off the waiver wire in season is batting average. So but my point is, like, you take Schwarber, you punt it, and you're gone. B, you go and take Corey Seager. The only thing I don't like about it is Kyle Schwarber eats the eliteness away from Corey Seager, and then all you've done is you become median about it. So then you have to work a little bit extra harder to pull back, which you can totally do. So that's why I feel like, in a nutshell, I just want to say Brian Reynolds, even though Schwarber from three categories is absolutely elite, and you can do a whole lot with that. And head-to-head category specifically is something that you can manage, as Frank said. But like Brian Reynolds in general, he mentioned he hits the ball hard, career high 47.3% hard hit rate, career high barrel percentage he put up this year. Also think Pirates stink in general. O'Neal Cruz is back. Well, I'm a big O'Neal Cruz guy this year. Helps the offense a little bit. He's still running. The power numbers hover between that 25-30 range. Expected numbers not only tell a great story, but the batting average in the 280s on the complete other side. I think I have a better team and I am better versed in a draft with Brian Reynolds than I am taking Kyle Schwarber and kind of chasing my tail a little bit. Other people might just be awesome, good to go, no worries about it. I feel like Brian Reynolds makes it easier for me. And sometimes I need that in drafts.
Yeah, he gives you that balance, right? You don't have to go extremes like we've been talking about. If you take this guy, you have to take that guy to balance it out. You take Brian Reynolds, you don't have to worry so much about having to take another player that'll balance out his stats. He just kind of does a little bit of everything. Not at an elite level necessarily, but he's a good stabilizer across all 5 categories. O'Neal Cruz coming back in that lineup. I mean, I don't know exactly how capped any individual player is in a bad lineup for runs and RBIs, but O'Neal Cruz, when he came up a couple of years ago, he was averaging more than a run and an RBI per game. It was like 50 runs, 45 RBIs in like 70-something games. it goes to show you that talent in a bad lineup can still lead to nice volume. It doesn't necessarily have to be only those players on good teams. You might just see Brian Reynolds end up with like 180 runs and RBIs, and I think that would be a little bit surprising, but honestly, maybe not if Cruz is able to come back and be fully healthy this year. Let's move into some pitchers. Let's talk about a couple of starting pitchers here, and this one is the battle of the ascending guy versus the kind of confusing guy who has a good year every other year and then a bad year every other year. Tarik Skubal in the second half of the season was about as good as anybody, probably the best pitcher over the last 70 or 80 innings. And now people, including Scott White, I believe, have him ranked as a top 10 starting pitcher. People are really shooting Tarik Skubal up the draft boards. And then on the other side, you got Nola, who's Mr. 200 innings, Mr. 200 strikeouts, but he does kind of bounce back and forth between really good years and really bad years. Now, typically the even years are good years, and it being 2024, that might be a little bit positive for Nola. Welsh, is your preference the old guy or the young guy here?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, we are in the good year, by the way, of Nola. We're coming up to the good side of that because he ended up having a 4.46 ERA. I will tell you, this is probably the biggest discrepancy I think I have in my personal ranks versus like the closeness of these debates. I'm not interested in Nola this year. I might be wrong. It's the even year. That's great. I mean, I will say expected ERA 3.7, which is pretty solid to the 4.46. I mean, that kind of tells you a little bit of that story that you were wanting of the even odd years. But K percentage was the lowest actually since 2016. I don't like the ups and downs. I just don't think there's anything uniquely unique. We talk about the glob. The glob. He's, to me, like a prototypical globby pitcher. Like what he does at his median level, I just don't see why I need that than waiting 2 or 3 rounds and taking shots on players like Bobby Miller, who we really like, or getting Zach Eflins and stuff like that. So I might eat my words on that. And you turn it back around to say, yeah, what's there not to love about Tarik Skubal? 32.9% K percentage, under 5% walk percentage. I mean, that's one of the things that you end up getting with Nola you love is, oh man, he doesn't walk a whole bunch. Well, either is Skubal, improved it, career best with high strikeout rates, had an expected ERA better than his actual ERA. Batting average, expected batting average was under 200 this past year. And fastball was fantastic. Got 1.5 miles plus velocity added to it, 95.8 with a 25.5% whiff rate, which is like absurd for fastball. A 50% whiff rate on his changeup. There are only so many players with 50% whiff rates that they use the pitch 20% more of the time. He has got one of those. Sliders working, 4-pitch pitcher. I'm down with Tarik Skubal, elite strikeouts. This is easily my guy over Nola. But I think Frank is going to be with me, but I just don't know if the discrepancy is as big as I'm making it with Frank.
What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, so I actually haven't ranked pitchers yet. I'm kind of still in the process of doing that, but I will have Tarik Skubal ranked ahead of Nola. I don't know how big, again, that disparity is going to be. Skubal seems like a pretty polarizing player this offseason, and I get it, but let's just focus on the positives for now. Among starting pitchers with 80 innings pitched in 2023, Skubal ranked 5th in ERA, 1st in FIP, 1st in XFIP, 1st in Sierra, 6th in K per 9, 2nd in K minus walk rate, 6th in swinging strike rate. And people might point to a lack of track record. He hasn't done it for that long. It was, whatever. It was, I don't even know how many innings it was, but it wasn't that many.
It's like 80 or 90.
Yeah. He also pitched well, Tarik Skubal did, in 2022. So if you combine the past 2 years that we've seen from him, you get 36 starts from Skubal of a 3.23 ERA, a 105 whip, 10 K per 9, 48% ground ball rate, 13% swinging strike rate. That's a better pitcher than Nola. So I am taking Tarik Skubal. He gets the strikeouts. He limits walks, elite ground ball rate. He limits barrels as well. Welsh mentioned the changeup. It might be the best changeup in all of baseball. 167 batting average against, a 27.6% swinging strike rate on that changeup. Some people might say it's just crazy stuff. The schedule for Skubal was very favorable down the stretch, and I can't deny that. But I mean, you face who's in front of you, and what did he do? He dominated those players.
A lot of Royals and stuff. That was the thing. Yeah, that is a big thing that people are the polarizing opposite side will show you the game log of the guys that he faced, which is a fair point.
And look, it's a lack of track record, right? Skubal hasn't thrown more than 149 and a third innings in a regular season yet in the majors, but I feel like you could supplement Skubal with other innings eaters. Logan Webb, Framber Valdez, Logan Gilbert. I mean, guys later on, Merrill Kelly, Jose Barrios, guys like that. Nola, over the past 3 years, cumulative, past 3 seasons, a 4.09 ERA. That is not good. And people will point to the fact that he's a workhorse. Well, guess what? He's giving you an ERA over 4 over 200 innings. That means it's actually more harmful towards you. So, look, there's a chance with the even year, odd year, 1 year on, 1 year off, that Nola just bounces back and he's got like a low 3s ERA and 220 strikeouts and he makes us look dumb. But like the inconsistency year over year, I'd rather just not mess with that. And I will take the breakout type, mold here in Tarik Skubal, and then I'll probably try and supplement him with some other higher floor innings eater types later on in the draft.
I feel like it's like a little bit easier to take your shots on upside pitchers than I will hitters, because I feel like there's enough later pitcher you mentioned, but you keep going like Shane Bieber's of the world. Like you can get innings eaters that can bring down maybe some of the whip and the ERA numbers. I feel like I'm a little bit more prone to take my shots with pitchers than I am doing the Ellies of the world at like the very tippy top. But I don't know. That's kind of in the mold of different drafts we're doing, and it's going to continue to evolve through the draft season. But yeah, like I like how Frank said that, like you can really balance out some of the negatives that could follow Tarik Skubal. The one thing we know is going to be there is like big strikeouts, and that's kind of what a lot of us are chasing.
I'm going to get myself in trouble here. You guys, you good with that? You want me to get in trouble?
Yes.
Last offseason, this is
Lance Lynn?
No, Spencer Strider. Spencer Strider, when everything started last offseason, he had a 3rd round price tag. And some people might have said, wow, I mean, it's so high. It's such a, lack of a track record. He hasn't done this yet. To be fair, the strikeouts are even better for Strider than they are for Tarik Skubal. But people who were fading Strider in like the 2nd or 3rd round, I mean, look at them now, right? Like Strider is the first pitcher off the board. He's a mid-first round pick. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen for Skubal, but I think it's within the range of outcomes. And Steamer kind of agrees because they have Skubal projected as the number 4 starting pitcher in fantasy right now. So just kind of wanted to sneak that in there and get myself in trouble a little bit.
It's okay. I got some clickbait headline material. Frank Stampfl says that Tarik Skubal's better than Spencer Strider.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. Oh, that'll be the debate. Yeah, do the artwork. Do Strider and Skubal, and Frank is like holding up
Frank in the middle.
Yeah, but Frank is holding up Skubal's hand to really get people worked up.
Little search engine optimization there.
I like it.
Let's talk about another starting pitcher matchup. I think, honestly, I wish that Nola's price was cheaper. I think based on the year that he just had, we shouldn't have to be paying a 4th round price for him. And the way that pitching will move up, it'll be a 3rd round price. Aaron Nola's going to be going in the 40s. It's not requisite with what we just saw this past season. I'm hoping that we can see some even year magic. But yeah, I'm probably not clicking draft on either of these guys, to be honest. Like I'll miss out on the upside of Skubal just because I worry. I kind of do this with all these young players. Somebody said the other day, you hate young players. I don't hate young players, but I don't necessarily want to take them at their close to peak price. And this is a peak price for Skubal at this point, 4th round.
That's the Dan Vespris coming out in you, though. I just want to point out that's the school of that is a sports ethos school of Dan Vespris, hating those young kids for the old crusty guys. That is a playbook. Shout out to Dan.
Well, he was my tutor. He's the one who brought me up in this world. So maybe I do have some of Dan's tendencies.
Yeah.
Hate the kids, love the old man squad. Let's talk about another kind of battle of old versus young, not to the same extent, but Blake Snell and Grayson Rodriguez, 65 and 67 on the ADP numbers. I'm going to be fading Snell to some extent, and I said that yesterday. And then Rob Silver pointed out to me that Blake Snell has the 12th best SP projections on Steamer. And I just think I worry about the walks catching up with him. I think he was really lucky this past season. And I think that also coincides with Grayson just getting better and better throughout the year. Welsh, do you have a preference between these two guys? For me, it's definitely Grayson, but I can understand people going with the Cy Young winner as well. Where are you standing right now on this debate?
Yeah, this was Blake Snell was the star of First Pitch, by the way, in all of his conversations. Shout out to Eno with the Blake Snell. There was a big Eno versus Nick Pollock Blake Snell conversation that happened. Grayson is as exciting as they get, of course. And from a dynasty perspective, I have Grayson over Blake Snell. So maybe this isn't going to be popular, but I'm going to go with Snell. I actually kind of think we're getting a discount based off of his production, which I know is odd to say. And I think some people would disagree with me, like, no, you're still blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, Cy Young, 250+% pitches that he threw 10% or more of the time. Slider, 53% whiff rate. Curveball, 56.3% whiff rate. Not looking at it right now, but I want to say that's second or third best single whiff pitch from a starting pitcher. The forkball from Kodai Senga is number one, but Snell's both. The 56.3 curveball is one of the best. The fastball, getting it done. Like, listen, the combo is elite. The strikeouts are elite. That is not going to change in my mind. 31.5% K percentage. 2.25 ERA, even his expected ERA was still in the threes, which we could stomach. It's just the walks. That's all that it comes down to. 13.3% is stomach turning walks that you've got to come to terms with. Now, destination could play maybe a little bit of a role in this. Like, am I going to love if he goes to the Angels? I don't know. If he goes to a ballpark, what if he goes to Seattle? What if, his hometown thing? What if he goes to Seattle and there's a better ballpark factor? Also, some really smart pitchers. Maybe they can figure out some of the walk things. All I'm saying is like, Grayson to me is kind of like Blake Snell, except without all the full pitch mix and probably less projected innings. So it might not be popular, but I kind of think Snell can eat up some innings, huge strikeouts. I would love to pair him with George Kirby and kind of mitigate some of that whip a little bit, but that's me kind of doing the Corey Seager and Kyle Schwarber thing as well. But I will have more shares of Blake Snell over Grayson for this year, but Dynasty, it is Grayson Rodriguez.
It'd be nice if Snell goes to Seattle, gets to rub up against Kirby, and maybe shave a couple points off of the walk rate. It's like a 10-point difference between the two of them.
Ballpark itself might be the thing that helps that. The ballpark itself might bring everything down a little bit. He might be a little bit more comfortable in hitting in the zone, knowing you've got a little bit more wiggle room out in the outfield.
Yeah. Frank, do you agree with Welsh?
Did you guys just assume that the Mariners would spend money like in an offseason on players? I mean, granted, they signed Mitch Garver, but I'm not sure that they're going to do much more than that.
It'll probably be at the expense of they'll like go move one of those pitchers to get a hitter in, and then they can justify it. But yeah, good point.
It would be an amazing fit. I do agree with that, but my guess is probably not on Seattle. There's like San Francisco, the Angels, Yankees are rumored to be in on Blake Snell. That is where I'm going here as well. I'm going to take Blake Snell over Grayson Rodriguez. I like both. I don't love both at their current cost going, just inside the top 70 picks. Snell, I agree that it feels like coming off the season he just had, he should probably be going higher than he is. Like he just won the Cy Young. He's the 19th starting pitcher off the board since December 1st. So we're already kind of baking in regression. It's not like we're drafting him as like a top 10 or top 12 starting pitcher. And if we focus on the positives, amazing ERA. We know that 2.25 ERA, 234 strikeouts, the third most in all of baseball this season. He was second in K per nine. He was second in swinging strike rate at 15.3% swinging strike rate. I mentioned with Tarik Skubal, the changeup, 27.6% swinging strike rate. Blake Snell has 3 pitches with a swinging strike rate over 20%. And that is unheard of. He became a more complete pitcher this year. In the past, it's been fastball, breaking ball. That's it. He threw his changeup more this year. It excelled. It was a much better pitch than ever before. He's just a more complete pitcher. He's got 4 legit pitches that he can go to. Now, look, the walks are a problem. That's going to elevate the whip. Obviously, I don't think the ERA is going to stay in the mid-2s if we're just, projecting regression. It's probably a low to mid-3s ERA and like a 120 whip. So that's not an ace. But again, for where he's going, you're not really paying ace value. Like you can get Blake Snell pretty easily as your SP2. So I would lean with him. And just to say all that, I really do like Grayson Rodriguez. Once he returned from the minors last year, he wasn't the ace we expected yet, but he was very, very close to it. And I think we're going to get a big season out of him. I would lean Blake Snell. Yeah,
I think it's close. I mean, Grayson's got that nice ballpark with the adjusted wall. He doesn't have to worry about home runs to righties.
True.
It's real close. And I think once Snell actually signs somewhere, I'll have more of a solidified opinion. If he goes to the Angels, I can't see myself being that interested. If he goes to the Yankees, I think I'd probably take him over Grayson. But if he does go to the Angels, I think I'd have to go Grayson just based on the team context. The Angels just seem to ruin everything that goes their way. That would be kind of where I would be at right now, but I think I'm going to reserve judgment until we fully know where Snell's signing. I figured we would have known by now, but a lot of big name free agents still left unsigned. Let's talk about one more debate here before I let you guys go, and we'll move into the pen. It's Emmanuel Clase and Camilo Doval, 50 and 52 on the ADP numbers. Clase was not quite Class A this past season. And Duvall really surprised me. I thought that he would not be the everyday closer. I thought when they signed Rogers heading into the season that he would eat away a little bit. It would be more of a righty-lefty split. But Duvall was excellent this past season. They're both going at the same price. Frank, who is your preference here between these two?
I like both. I think both are top 5 closers entering the season. And I was off Camilo Duvall last year. I was worried about Gabe Kapler. I was worried about the control, and he proved me completely wrong. With that being said, I will take Emmanuel Clase, just more of a track record, back-to-back seasons with 40-plus saves. I know the strikeouts came down. The swinging strike rates came down as well. But the velocity was still pretty much intact. He turns 26 in March. So it's not like he's getting older or we have really anything to worry about, like why he lost so much on the whiffs and the strikeouts this past season. So I think Class A strikeouts will bounce back. With that being said, like Duvall's strikeouts will be much better. There's no doubt about it. But I will give Class A the edge in terms of, I think the ratios could be better. I do think that he can get more saves, but strikeouts in favor of Duvall. To be honest, I'm probably not drafting either at cost. I usually like to shop in like the next tier, the Bryce Iglesias, Ryan Presley, kind of, the 8 to 12 range, I guess, at closer. But if I am taking one of those two, it'll be Class A, just a hair ahead of Duvall.
He's getting a little more expensive, but Pete Fairbanks is also pretty reasonably priced this year as a closer. Past pick 100, another guy that you can look at past these couple guys. Welsh, do you have a preference between these two? I think I might slightly lean Class A, but I think it's a coin flip at the end of the day.
Yeah, I completely agree with Frank said. This is not the department I shop in. So if I'm picking between them, I kind of would want to go track record. There's been some trade stuff about Class A, but wherever he goes, he's going to be the closer. People throw out the Dodgers stuff. Can you imagine? So it's like if a team were to commit, it's probably going to be a winning team, and he goes into an even better situation. I like the low walk rates. 2-pitch pitchers sometimes kind of fall into those things where like he uses fastball 7% more of the time. Well, that ended up kind of hurting him a little bit, even though the whiff rate was there. I think he lost some trust in his slider. Exit velocity had a 3 mile per hour increase against the slider. There's some spin decrease as well. So I think there was a little bit of a feel loss from Class A. I think he can get that back with low walks. I think the strikeouts could come up. No harm in taking Duvall, but again, not my department store of closers, but I will take Class A.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Bit of a down year, but I think overall you got to trust a bit of a longer track record with Class A. He's the guy that I think I'd be more confident in as well. Guys, I'm going to let you go. I really appreciate you coming on today. I hope we've been able to sort out some conundrums for people if we all agreed on a certain player. I don't think we helped out too much, but at least the discussion maybe was a little bit helpful for you guys. Thank you for everybody who consumed the show live. It'll also be out as a podcast later today. Before I let these guys go, I want to let them tell you where you can find their work here once again real quick. Frank, where we can find your work, but what exactly we got going on over at CBS?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter, X, again, I don't know, at Roto_Frank, but you can find my work over at CBS, the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast. We recently ramped up to 3 podcasts per week in the month of January. We'll go to 4 in February, and then 5 from March, basically through the end of the season. So we're going to be going live every single day from March on. We have a 5-minute podcast in case like you just don't have enough time to consume the full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. And we'll have rankings, articles coming out on the site as well, cbssports.com/fantasybaseball.
I've been meaning to watch the Lance Brozdowski episode you did a couple days ago. I'm sure that one was great. You guys should be checking out everything at CBS on the podcast feed on YouTube and everything that Frank does on Twitter and at CBS on the website as well. Everything CBS related you can find Frank's footprints all over it. Welshie, tell us once more where we can find your stuff, man.
That was super rude, by the way, of Frank, where he had Lance on and then he brought me back on. I was like, don't have me follow Lance, please. Like, don't do that. I'm very much looking forward to that episode, but don't have me follow Lance because Lance has been a rock star. Is it the Welsh on the Twitters? That's the best place to follow to see what I got going on. Again, we mentioned I'm full-time over at FantasyPros now, and I'm locking down their baseball a whole bunch. So you can check out Leading Off. I've been doing a Dynasty show once a week on there. We just came back yesterday. Joe Pisapia and I, we're just ramping up those for all draft prep. Also on the YouTube, youtube.com/FantasyPros, you're going to get to see the video version of the episodes. So go and check all that out. Support the baseball pod. That's one of the many reasons that they brought me on. So hopefully everybody wants to continue to check that out. And of course, In This League still rolls on. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever. Prospect One for all your prospect and dynasty stuff. Like I said, my Twitter handle's like the best way because I still do have my hands in different things, but love to have people check out all the stuff. And yeah, man, thanks for having us on. I love you guys. I love Dan. I love Aaron. I love the crew, and getting me on with Frank is fantastic. Me and Frank Stampfl. So I appreciate it, Joey.
We go back a couple of years now. You go back with my bosses for a long time. It's always great to talk with you. Both of you guys, I know you guys are good friends. You guys have become good friends of mine. It's always great to talk over a podcast and in person when we get to see each other down in Arizona. It feels far away, but I'm sure it'll creep up on us before we even know it. You guys make sure you're following everybody on Twitter. Is it the Welsh at Roto_Frank? And you can find me at Joe Orico99. Again, thank you to everybody who watched live. This one will be out later today on the podcast feed. But until tomorrow, everybody have a great night. Take care. We'll see you then.